Hey everyone, well, welcome. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Dan Kantor. I'm founder and CEO of PilotShip, which is a 3-month-old startup, so I'm very much in a lot of the same boat that all of you are in. But I'm here to talk about how to build products users love. So the first thing I'll say about that is that really I like to say how to build products that people love. I find that when we refer to them as users, we kind of make them into this thing that maybe is not, we don't feel a connection to. Whereas when we say people, we feel like these are everyday people. These are people that are our friends. These are people we see on the street. They're our classmates. They're all sorts of people. And we think about them that way. I find that it helps. So a little bit about me before I go into any of this. So as Sarah mentioned, I'm an ITP graduate from 2005, way back in the day before this great place existed, the eLab. I've been at both startups and large companies alike. So I've kind of like bounced back and forth. I was at Delicious way back in the day, which was one of the first Web 2.0 startups that kind of invented the idea of tagging, which we all take for granted now. We sold that to Yahoo. I spent some time at Yahoo, left Yahoo to start a company called StreamPad, which was my real first foray into my own company, my own product. It was a social music app, and I learned so much then, but it was just me, and I didn't have a team, and I kind of didn't know at all what I was doing, but I just worked from home in my apartment and built something that I loved, and eventually got some other people to love it, and then eventually ended up selling that to AOL, where I spent 2.5 years as the product director on AOL Music. So, going back and forth, after I left AOL, I started another music startup called XFM, so you could kind of see a pattern here. And, that time I hired a team. We were about 12 people. We raised a little bit of money from venture capitalists. And, that time was I'll call it a lot more real. So, now I was not just coding at night, in my apartment, but rather I had a team, and we had to collaborate on things, and we had to work together, and we had arguments, and I had to think about healthcare for my team. So all sorts of things that are kind of like the unfun parts of, let's say, even doing a startup. But at the same time, they're probably just as important as building the product. So we did XFM for 4 years, and then we sold that to Rhapsody. So Rhapsody was the original music streaming site way before Spotify kind of ate everyone's lunch there. Rhapsody is still around, renamed as Napster. And I spent a little over a year there as the VP of product on the Rhapsody product. So I think one of the things that as I think about going back and forth, and I'll talk about Clarify in a second, is that building products is kind of the same thing no matter where you are. So when you're one person, when you're 2 people, when you're 10 people, when you're 200 people, when you're a few thousand people, it really comes down to a lot of the same basics. Obviously, a lot of the resources you have at your disposal are going to change, but in the end of the day, you're still working on a lot of the same stuff, and a lot of stuff I'm going to cover here. So yeah, after Rhapsody, I went to Clarify, which is a AI startup here in New York City. I was a VP of product there for 2 years. Again, a team grew from 10 people when I joined to 60 people when I left. And again, more of the same stuff. It doesn't really matter that I was now doing AI and not music. It's at the end of the day, it's products, and whether we were selling them to businesses or consumers, a lot of the same stuff. I recently left Clarify 3 months ago to found a new company called PilotShip. So I'm the CEO. I'm also the only developer and the assistant to the developer, and you name it. I do have one partner who he handles all of the business side of things. Also tries to write some code that I generally throw out. But yeah, it's really interesting because a lot, as we're doing PilotShip, we're 3 months in, and we're following this process, and it's not easy, and we suffer every day. And just because I've done this before doesn't really make it any easier. But as I go through and I talk about it, I kind of see that it's all the same, and that's the point I kind of want to make to all of you. So without further ado, I'll jump into building products people love. So building a product is hard, right? People's expectations are really, really high. We've got so many apps in the App Store right now that to try to break through that noise is incredibly difficult. They're incredibly high quality. There's also some really low quality ones. But at the end of the day, there are so many apps that how are you going to stand out? How are you going to do something different? How are you going to do something better? That's the kind of stuff that we want to think about, right? There's only so much attention everybody has. I think the average person uses like 4 or 5 apps a day, and that's it. We may have 50 apps on our phones, but we really only open a few because we don't really just have that much time. And how are you going to break through? And if you are going to break through, how are you going to take time from one of the other great apps that everyone loves? But at the same time, building a product is easy, right? It's basically free. I mean, you put in your time, and that costs a lot for you, but you can get an app out there and not spend money. 10, 15 years ago when I was first starting out in the industry, absolutely not the case. You had to have a ton of money up front. You had to lease servers. You had to do all these sorts of things that you just don't have to do now. You could basically get an account on Amazon or Google and pay nothing for the next year or forever because you're so small that they don't even want your money. So it's free. There's lots of books. There's lots of blog posts. There's podcasts. There's great programs like we're at here now. There's mentors out there. There's people that you can talk to. There's all sorts of resources for you at your disposal to help you. So lots of things that are easy. And there's billions of potential customers worldwide. We're not talking about opening a store in a small town where you're hoping to get like the foot traffic that walks by. Potentially, you have access to everyone on the planet, everyone that has a smartphone in their pocket. It's pretty unbelievable. So when you think about it from that point of view, wow, like let's go do it. So where do we begin? I like to say it starts with an itch that you'd like to scratch. If you're starting with something that you truly feel you have a need for, you have a problem that you want to solve, that's the best place to be. If you're starting for other reasons like we want to make a lot of money or we want to look cool, yeah, it's going to be tough. But if you're doing something day in and day out, night in and night out, putting your sweat, blood and tears into it, then you really want it to be something that you want to build and you want to work on. I'll tell you, throughout my career, there's been times where either I've come up with things or people have approached me about partnering with things, and I think about it for a while, and I'm like, do I want to every day of my life think about that and do that and work on that? And if the answer is no, then definitely don't do it. Don't do it even if you think, it could be a cool opportunity. There's lots of cool opportunities, but I'll tell you right now that if you're not working on something that you believe in and that you really want to see out there in the world, you want to create or change or make better, then you're going to lose interest pretty quickly. So let's say we've got that idea, right? We all have something. We're all probably sitting here. We know the idea is in our heads. I've got one. You've got one. You've got one. And where do we begin now, right? So what's next? So the first thing you should do is talk to people. Do not sit down and start writing code. Do not start working on your product. Go and talk to people because you have an itch that you want to scratch. Do other people have that same itch? Let's find out. Let's talk to everyone and as many people as we can and find out if they also feel that kind of pain. You may end up finding a lot of people that are just like, nah, that's not so bad. Or, cool idea, but I'm not going to switch from the thing I'm doing now. Or, it's hard to get people to change, right? So you want to make sure that people sit there and they tell you how they're thinking about that problem. They're telling you what solutions they've tried. They're telling you other products out there that kind of try to do the same thing you're doing that you didn't know about. There's all sorts of things that you're going to learn from people. When you first start, all you should be doing is spending time talking to people. Talk to your friends, but talk to your non-friends, right? You want to make sure that people are being honest with you. They're not just kind of telling you what you want to hear. They're not just being nice to you, and that's hard. We'll talk about some strategies to kind of get around that, but at the end of, it's imperative that you hear from people and make sure that the problem you think exists actually exists for other people, or else you're just going to build it for yourself. So you've talked to a lot of people, right? Seems like a viable thing. What are you going to do now? Well, we talk about MVPs, which are minimum viable products. And what minimum viable products, or the really important part about that is that it's a product and it's viable. The minimum part means that you're not spending a lot of time building it because all that time going into building it, you're most likely going to not be so right in the beginning, and the more time you spend, you're just wasting your time. So when we talk about an MVP, I love this picture, because what this picture shows is that you're not, the top part, you're not just putting out a circle, which is nothing, and then, or a wheel, and then 2 wheels, which are also nothing, and then, oh, you're going to build around the car. You're not, the important part is, and if you look at the bottom, it's that at every phase of the MVP, you're building a viable product. You're building something that's useful for people. So what's our idea here? It's transportation. It's trying to get people to go from point A to point B. Well, before you go and build your electric autonomous car, how about just trying a skateboard, right? Skateboard gets people from A to B. Is that a good idea? Do people want to get from A to B? Has anyone thought that it's a problem? Like, is walking so bad that they want to like move faster and they wanted this other cool method of getting from A to B? Well, let's test that out. Okay, let's slap a board on top of 2 wheels and give it to them, and wow, people are amazed that they can go from here to there. Well, that's cool, but that's not really what you want, your grand vision. Your grand vision is this unbelievable car that you're going to build. Well, the next part is, well, like, how do they do it faster? And you get the idea. It's in each phase, you're just making it a little bit more than minimum, but you're still keeping it viable. And I think that's really important to remember. All right? There's lots of people, lots of times, I've done it myself. I'm guilty, by the way, of every problem I'll point out in here. I've done it sometime, and I'll still do for half the time. But a lot of people put out something, and they think, okay, well, it's minimum, and it's it's halfway towards what I want to get. Let's see if people like it. And they generally don't. They generally see through it. And it's really difficult, because where do you draw the line between what is minimum viable and what's not? Well, we go back to talk to people, all right? So after the first day, after the first week that you have something, send it to your first good friend that's is going to try everything that you send, and see what they say. Because they might actually say to you, like, this is completely not usable, or I don't even know what I'm doing here. Whereas they might say, like, oh, this is cool. It did what it was supposed to do, and that's great. So I think it's important when you're thinking of MVPs to remember that all of those letters are really important. Don't just pick and choose the ones that you like. So what's next? You want to incorporate and patent. Just kidding. Don't do that. Don't just incorporate and patent. Obviously, I'm joking here, but there's a lot of reasons that you want to protect your idea, and there's a lot of reasons that you don't want to go share it with the world before it's ready, because then someone's going to steal it. Totally get all that, very understandable. There's a balance between sharing your idea, letting people know that you trust, that what it is and everything, but also not thinking to yourself, like, I have to protect this with all costs. Because you're not actually protecting anything, right? It's an idea in your head. If you don't have something built, if you don't have something that's out there, if you don't have something that people are using, I mean, sure, if you want to go patent it and be a troll and try to stop everyone else from building things that are the same, sure. But I don't recommend that route. I think it's a waste of time. And I think that you're going to spend you have very precious time, and you want to spend it wisely on some of these other things. So what do you really want to do? You want to go out there and you want to get 5 MVP testers. Okay? Key points here. This is not your mom's spouse or best friend. All right? These are people that are not just going to tell you, I love it, it's the best, you're the best, and you've always been the best. Like, that's not what we're about here. We need honest feedback. So people that you've talked to while you were doing those conversations, they've expressed interest, anyone, you go back to them now and you say, hey, here's my product, I'd love you to try it, and send it to them. I actually like to go and meet personally at this stage with these 5 people, sit down and walk them through it, right? It's 5 people, and these 5 people are the first time you're ever putting yourself out there, putting your product out there to the world, and you want to make sure that, again, that these are 5 people that are going to give you honest feedback. They've expressed interest in it. So choose 1 or 2 KPIs. These are important metrics that you want to track. They could be the most simple thing, like person created an account, or like person didn't throw up when they looked at the color. Like whatever it is, at that point, it's going to be a simple, 1 or 2 simple things, but you should start getting in the habit of tracking those things. And you don't have to build crazy software to track them. A lot of times you could call up someone on the phone and say, like, oh, were you able to figure out such and such? Yes? Great. I'll I'll put that in the yes column. No? Okay, not so good. I got to work on that. You want to listen to people very carefully when they're talking, okay? So it's your baby, and this is going to be one of the hardest parts of building products. It's your baby, and you love it, and you're not looking at your product. You're looking at your product now, plus the great vision you have and where you know it's going to be. And that's cool, but they're not seeing that. They're seeing what's in front of them, and maybe you've told them where you're going, but they'll nod and say, oh, yes, yes, or sometimes they'll say, oh, absolutely, I get it, and that's great. But again, you're putting something in front of them that you want to get their honest feedback, and you want to listen to them very carefully of what they have to say. One of the things about listening to people, though, is you kind of have to dissect when they're talking about features that maybe are aspirational, like, man, if this skateboard could start flying, then I'd use it. Okay, that's cool and all, but that's not really helping you with the actual skateboard you built right now. So whereas if someone's saying, this skateboard's great, but I noticed when I'm riding on it, and I kind of lean to the left like it goes right. And that's kind of weird for me. I thought that it would go left when I lean left. So things like that, you have to kind of be very, very, like I say dissecting, but you really need to listen carefully and understand the difference between the feedback that they're giving you about the current product as they see it versus these aspirational things of if it had such, such, and such, that would be great. Write them all down, because in a month, a year, whenever, when you have those things, you better go back to them and let them know. They're potential customers, and they ask for something, and you want to let them know. But be very careful there, because again, it's really difficult, but you're going to hear things that man, if the skateboard was flying, then I would totally use it. And you're going to go back home and be like, we have to build this flying skateboard. That's it. That's the coolest thing to build. Okay, and then you're going to go to the next meeting, and then the person's going to say, I need it to totally just float over the water. You're like, that's it. Floating over the water is the idea. So again, it's difficult. It really is. But you talk to 5 people, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are probably going to say kind of similar things in certain ways. And you need to tally those all up and then figure out okay, well, those 3 people, that's something I heard from 3 people, something I've been thinking as well, and that seems like the next thing that we want to iterate on. And that's, again, the key. Keep iterating and don't stop until people love it. So you're going to show them something. It's very rare that you show someone a beginning MVP of something and they wow, this is the best thing ever, I love it. I don't think any products are that way. Google, Facebook, whatever, they didn't the first version or that they ever showed anyone was good. Of course it wasn't good. But they didn't stop. They kept iterating, and they believed in where they were going. And if you ask them if they thought back then that where they're going to get to now, probably not. I mean, other than this could be huge, and I'm the person to do it. Beyond that, you don't actually know where it's going to go. But if you keep talking to people, you keep getting this feedback, you keep iterating, you're going to get there. You're going to get to a certain place. So after 5 people love it, keep it going, right? Expand. Go to 10 people now. Again, you want to keep iterating, keep the same process, but now you're starting to expand it a little bit, 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, whatever you feel comfortable with. And at this point, when I say loving it, I mean that they're coming back on their own. So that's a key thing, okay? When you send something to someone, and they're going to check it out. Again, they've expressed some interest, they maybe know you, they like the idea, they're going to check it out. If they don't come back to use it the next day, the next week, the next month, whatever it is, you didn't get them, right? So they told you they liked it, but they're not actually going to become users of it. And again, if we've got an MVP that's usable, then they should come back. So maybe you don't have an MVP that's usable yet, right? Totally fine. Keep iterating, keep iterating. At some point, you're going to notice, oh man, this person just logged in after I didn't even send an email this time, and this person logged in. You're on to something there. That means that they're starting to come back. Do they love it? I'm not sure if they love it yet, but again, we don't go from 0 to love instantly. I mean, I guess there is love at first sight, but not so much in products. It's really about starting to use it, finding it useful, and then moving on. So at that point, we don't stop. We don't stop because we are now going to go into private beta. We're going to get 100 testers. And the key there is that they need to love it like the first 10, like the first 5 did. So open it up a little bit more, expand beyond who you know. Start sending some, random emails out. Post something on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it is, Twitter. But start getting some random people that you didn't know, that you had no connection to, and let them in. Again, it's going to be a totally different experience for them. They don't know who you are. You didn't sit down with them. You didn't have a conversation. You're still going to want to try to get their feedback somehow. If you can, you're going to try to email them, get that conversation going. If they're in New York, you're going to want to meet with them. If you're, get on the phone with them, wherever they are. But the point is that we're getting some new, different people in, and the goal is still the same. We want to keep iterating. We want to make sure that they love it like the first 10 did. And if the first 10 do, there's a decent chance that the next 100 might, right? Or at least, 30 out of the 100. Maybe that's good enough. So then we get 100 people that love it. Maybe we keep going a little bit, 200. At some point, you're going to say, all right, let's remove private beta, all right? There's people coming to my site. I don't need to start letting them in now. They can sign up for themselves. I feel confident in the product. I feel good that people love it. They're coming back to it. There's people that are coming, or people that I want to get coming, so we're going to open it up. So the thing about that is come up with a launch plan. I'm not going to give you great, I'm not going to prescribe what the launch plan is, other than that it's, TechCrunch is going to write about us, or some publication's going to blog about us, or I'm going to put up a Medium post, and it's all going to happen. That's not the way it happens. Again, it's you love your product, you think it's great, 100 people love it. The rest of the world doesn't know about it. The rest of the world probably doesn't care too much about it at this point either. So you want to come up with a launch plan. And some of the best products launched with really cool launch plans. I remember a few years ago, Mailbox came out, which was a new email service that they had this crazy line that you had to sign up, and you got on a line, and they told you how big the line was and all this stuff. And that was kind of new for the time. Now, it's been, people keep doing it. But at the time, they did it for the first time, and it got a ton of press from that. Or I don't know if everyone remembers the Dollar Shave Club that came out a few years ago that just sold for like $1 billion or something. Well, that video was unbelievable. The first video that came out with the CEO kind of walking around and describing the product, it was so crazy and unique and cool. It was shaving razors, right? Who thinks that's so interesting? But man, he really sold the thing, and he really had a launch plan and parlayed it all the way to $1 billion, right? So I think it's really important to have a launch plan. When you get to the point where you've got the beta testers, you're feeling good, sit down and spend some time on it. Talk to people, figure out the ways that you want to kind of attack this, and come up with something unique, right? It's just as important as your product at that point. But wait, you said love, okay? So again, why do people love products? In the beginning, when we talked about love, it was literally they came back, okay? Now the game has been upped, right? Now it's just not like they come back. It's how are they going to come back? How are they going to use this thing? Why are they going to use it? Why are they going to find this interesting? So love is a funny thing. There's a few reasons that we can point to why people love products. And if we all think about it, if we all think about the products we love, the apps we love, then it breaks down into a few basic things. Jobs to be done, habits, microinteractions, social validation. I mean, you get into each one of these. But when we talk about love, it's why would anyone fall in love with your app? And I'll say this, it doesn't really matter what app you're building. You could be building the most boring accounting software. There are going to be people that love it. There are going to be people that use it and love it. And there's really no industry that you can't build for, that you can't find customers that people are going to love, that people aren't going to love your thing. So why would people love it? Well, one of the reasons is that it's a job to be done, right? So Intercom, which is a really great product, and they have a really great blog, and they write a bunch of ebooks and stuff. I highly recommend following them and everything. They talk about this a lot. And the questions you have to ask yourself are, why are people using your product? What are they trying to accomplish, right? So what are they doing right now? Are they doing something to kind of, again, scratch that itch? How does your product improve upon that? And there's a saying out there that if your new product doesn't improve on the old product 10x, then people just aren't going to care. And 10x could be a few things. It could be 10x faster, 10x cheaper, 10x just more exciting in every way. I mean, hard to kind of quantify that. But the point is that you need to think about what people are trying to accomplish when they use your product, and are they able to accomplish this thing? And is the thing that you're even trying to help them accomplish, is that something that's even meaningful? Is there even a market for it? I came up with a product where I wanted my cat to use a cell phone to make a phone call to order food for themselves. Well, guess what? Like, there's not a market for that. Like, cats can't make phone calls, I know some of you have cats that can, but cats really can't do it. It's not a market, right? So it's cool and everything, but yeah. So you have to think of a market and think of what people are trying to accomplish, how they're currently doing it right now, and how you can make it so much better that they're going to switch. Because there's switching costs. If you think about personally the things that you use, and then you think, okay, there's something out there that might be better, but are you going to go through all the hoops to switch? Are you going to sign up for a new account? Are you going to move your data? You're going to friend this person, friend that person? I mean, LinkedIn, which I don't want to talk badly on, but I don't necessarily love their product, and a lot of people out there maybe don't love their product. Well, guess what? The switching costs of moving off LinkedIn are impossible. They're impossibly high. Lots of people try to replace LinkedIn. It's not going to really happen. There are crazy network effects going on there where everyone's on there, and to try to get them to switch, forget about it. So again, think about those sorts of things. Then there are habits, right? So we talked about people coming back. Why do they come back? There are hooks that you can build into your product that they're going to get them to come back. There are things that are outside of the product, like we talk about reactivation emails and sending sort of messages or push messages to people like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Like, those things, they're cool and all, but if you could build it into your product, the hook for people to come back, then you've got something. So again, that's the name of the game here. We're trying to get a lot of people, we're trying to get them to come back and use our product every day or every week or however often our product makes sense for them to use. Well, if we build something into the product that they're going to come back to automatically, then that's incredible, right? So we talk. There's a great book out here called Hooked, and then there's a great blog post, Managing New User Satisfaction by Brad Feld. And it just talks about how to build these things into your product. So if your product sends an email to some people every time someone else does something, and now it needs their feedback, well, that's interesting, right? So we want to think about those sorts of things, because you want to get people into the habit, but before they get into a habit, before they kind of form that habit, it's difficult. They forget about your app, right? Again, it's just one more app on their phone or one more website for them that they need to remember to come back to. So if you could build these things in that hooks them and kind of keeps them, reminding, but you're not doing it in a spammy way and you're not annoying them, and you're always giving them a way to kind of shut that off or opt out and things like that, then that's cool. That's just natural for your product, and every day or whatever, so they're going to see that and come back. How do you track users? Important. Put in the analytics early, because if you don't, you'll be flying blind. You'll not know why people are coming back, what they're coming back for, how they're coming back, when they're coming back. There's all sorts of free products out there, Google Analytics, all that kind of stuff. Just make sure you have some sort of tracking so you have some idea. Very early on, I think, when I was building out StreamPad, I didn't have any Google Analytics in there, and I met with someone, they're like, how many people are using your product? And I was like, I think a few hundred. They're like, why? I'm like, well, it seems like there's this many items in the database that kind of, I didn't really have a good answer. The point is there's so many free tools now. There's so many, we have all these tools at our disposal. It doesn't, it makes sense to just add that in and make sure it's there so that you're ready to, to know what people are doing. So another thing that I want to talk about is microinteractions. So if we think about the products we use, again, the bar has been set really high. When we think about the apps we use, all these details matter. These small moments when you like a photo and it kind of shows you something, hearts that come out or whatever it is, all those little things that delight people, they remember that kind of stuff. they also remember the negative stuff. So, you know, everyone has bugs. Everyone's going to have parts that are kind of broken that they, you know, didn't do right or whatever. But people are going to remember that stuff just as well. And you want to make sure that you're really on the other side of things, on the positive side. So there's a great book here, again, Dan Saffer, Microinteractions, really short book that just talks about these things, like when they push that button, if you, you know, do something kind of interesting or cool. I don't know if you guys remember Path. Path was like a kind of a failed social app back a few years ago. But one of the things they did was, this was totally new and no one had done it. When you hit the plus button to kind of like add something, it like popped up this like really cool menu, like add a photo, add text, add video. And like it was the first time. Now everyone does it, of course, but they were the first ones to do that. And I remember like opening up that app just to do it. And I would show people, I was like, check out how cool this is, right? I mean, I do that on my iPhone with some of the things to this day, like, you know, in iOS. Like, it's just cool, you know? And like, look, again, we're trying to get people to enjoy our experience, come back, and these details matter. Take them seriously. When we're building things, it's better to have a few small things that work really well and do cool stuff than to have just a ton of things, but again, there's bugs here, there's bugs there. Easier said than done. I'm as guilty as anyone for not following that, but you know, we should all keep that in mind as we're building. And then there's social validation, right? So this is a major one. I'm not the most social networking guy out there. I mean, I have accounts on everything, but like, the world is into this. I mean, you people are probably a lot more into it than I am. But the point is that when you post something, when you post an image, and then your friends like it, that's really cool. It's social validation. It makes you feel good. There's endorphins that fly around your head that are like, wow, this just feels nice, right? And then you like want to post the next day because that was cool that like everyone liked your really great cat photo or your sunset photo or the filter you put on it. So think about that kind of stuff. It's kind of an easy one. I mean, it's if you can get people to do something in your app or you know whatever it is, and then get other people to comment on it, like it, do something else that kind of interacts with it. We've got our hook, we've got our social validation, we've got kind of everything in there, right? You send out that notification or that email, so and so liked your photo. Cool, I'm going to click on that and like go back in and like look at the photo again, like and think about how they liked it. All that kind of stuff. It's built into, you could build it into your product. It gets people hooked. It gets people liking it. It builds good feelings and everything. So think about that as we're talking about building products people love. So now I want to talk about a little bit about how to work, right? So I've always found, and it's whether I'm two people in the renting a desk, which I'm currently, that's my current status, or managing a team of a few hundred people. How we actually do the work is really important. So it's, again, I go back to my days when I was in my apartment alone working, and I'd work till 4 a.m. and then I'd sleep till 2 p.m. And it's like there's a certain way that you kind of want to get into, and there's some good things that you can establish early on, because when we're thinking about building a product, we're also thinking about building a company, right? I mean, a lot of times our sort of goal here is to like, we're going to get bigger, we're going to keep growing, we're going to hire our first person, we're going to hire our third person, we're going to hire our 100th person. And the ways that you establish the culture and the way that you work early on are going to carry through. So I don't think it's too early to start to think about these things. So we talked about this a bunch, but even though you're out of the beta, you're into the, you've got thousands, 100,000 of customers, whatever it is, people are using your app. You still always want to kind of go in this circle, this small cycle of talking to people, building the product, testing that product, measuring it to see how it works, validating what you thought, and then just repeating. Right? So the key here is small when we talk about these cycles. And the reason I say that is this. This cycle is going to take time, and time is going to cost money, right? So if you go and you start, a cycle like this is going to take 6 months, well, if you're wrong when you get to the validate part, you just wasted a lot of time and money, right? So I get that not every product is going to fit into this. I'm mostly talking about building software here, but even hardware, there are ways that you could think about kind of making the cycle small. I read recently about that juice company that spent like 3 years building their like $500 juicer or whatever that I think failed now. And they spent 3 years building the product. And okay, I get it's hardware, but like 3 years is a really long time to be working on something. I heard that they were getting everything perfectly right. And someone tore it apart and said like, oh, they really did get everything perfectly right. Well, okay, but they're not around anymore, right? So they didn't get everything perfectly right. So really think about small cycles. I like to work in like 2-week sprints. You hear a lot about sprinting and stuff. Yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks to be kind of building things, right? You want to talk to people. You want to come up with some ideas. All right, I've talked to people. Now I'm going to go a little bit heads down and build. I'm going to come back up and I'm going to test. I'm going to talk about test all these things a little bit more in detail. But then we're going to measure it. Then we're going to validate it. Were we right or wrong? Okay, let's keep building. Let's keep talking to people. So when we talk to customers at this stage, again, we want to find that target audience. We want to find, you may have a ton of people that signed up. You may have a ton of people that are using your product. But you want to find the target audience that you're interested in now for maybe this next feature. Because maybe the next feature doesn't matter to some of your audience, right? But you want to make sure that you're talking to the right people, keeping it small. Again, you're kind of back into that phase of where you were when you were one or two people with 3 users. The real versus aspirational thing, still really important. You hear this a lot when for sales cycles now and stuff. When you're out there selling software, or if you're doing B2B, you're going to talk to a lot of potential customers, and they're going to tell you, oh, if you only did this, like we'd pay $1 million. And okay, that's cool, and maybe that's the thing to build. But you also want to kind of again separate it out and think about like, will they really do that? They said they would, but then when you go back to them and you built it, and they're like, well, our budget season starts in in November, and we've actually already closed that for this year, but there's all sorts of stuff. So you want to be careful about, again, when you talk to people, you really need to listen to what they're saying and try to figure out, try to break it down into like, what's real? What are the real things? What are the real problems that my software still has, or problems that I really think I could solve, and that kind of stuff. Again, keep that count. Keep the count. Keep it in a spreadsheet somewhere. Keep it wherever you want to keep it, but always write this stuff down. Always date it, always who you talk to, when you talk to them. Just keep it somewhere because you're going to go back to it. Let customers talk to each other. I know that's not always possible with some of the products, but a lot of times it is. And what you'll find is that they help each other. So with XFM, one of my music companies, we had this like pretty active listserv where just whoever wanted to join it of our customers could get on it. I think we even said like this is for like beta new features. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, come on it. And what ended up happening on this was people just helped other people out, right? So it was like, well, I find that I can't find this thing in this software. And then like before you could even answer it, someone else has answered it for you. That's awesome. That means you're starting to really build a community of people that love your product and that feel the time of that they could have the energy to like actually talk to someone else about it and tell them what to do. So again, if you can, I really encourage that kind of thing. When you're building, this is as important when you're 2 people as it is when you're larger. You want to think about what Paul Graham refers to as the maker schedule versus manager schedule. So Paul Graham's a very famous VC, started Y Combinator. What he talks about is this: that when you're working, especially when you're writing code, it's really hard to like go out and talk to people. So one of the things that I do right now at PilotShip that my partner and I do is we have code days and we have meeting days. So in the beginning, we had 2 days a week, Monday and Tuesday, where we just wrote code. Jason would be working on spreadsheets or again, trying to write some code, and I would be heads down writing code, and I wouldn't be talking to any customers on those days. Because if you talk to me on those days, I'm a mess. I can't talk to you. My mind is in loops and if statements, and I don't actually, I can't even comprehend what I'm saying. But that's cool because I need to be concentrating on that, and I also don't want to be interrupted during that. so I don't want meetings throughout the day if I'm coding. So think about this as you're working on your app, that you want to give yourselves the time to sit down and to spend as much time as you can uninterrupted working on these things. And then the reverse. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday were meeting days. Didn't write any code, didn't get upset when I had meetings that, oh man, I have to leave the office and talk to people. I was excited to talk to people. I set my expectations for those days. I knew that that's what I was going to do. And when you're talking to people all day, you get really into it. And then that second, third conversation, like you're like even more excited and stuff. So that, that's what we did. And the maker's schedule versus manager's schedule is something that's important as you grow, because you're going to now have people that should be coding all day. And when you're setting up these meetings, it's an interruption for them. So keep that in mind. And these things could shift. Now I'm actually coding 3 days a week and talking to people 2 days a week. And that might shift again, back or forth or whatever. But the point is that you could be flexible, but set that schedule and keep yourselves to it. And yes, sometimes like a meeting's going to come up that you have to take, and it's this important person that can only meet on Tuesdays, and you code Tuesdays. Okay, what I do in those instances is I schedule them really early in the morning. I schedule them at 9 a.m. So it's the first thing I do. I haven't sat down. I haven't wrote any code. I'm not getting interrupted. I haven't written code all day, and therefore my mind is mushy. I talk to them, and then I'm back in the office by 10 a.m., and I'm doing my thing. So testing. Testing is really important when you're building a product, okay? Software, hardware especially, you don't want your batteries blowing up or anything like that. Usability testing, code tests, code reviews, all this stuff is really, really, really important. There's a book out there, Rocket Surgery Made Easy by Steve Krug. There's usertesting.com. What these things allow you to do is they teach you how to do usability testing on the cheap. Back in the day when I was at AOL, we did usability testing. We had this whole crazy lab. It cost a ton. One of the startups I was with, even before that, we paid like $30,000 for a 2-day session with the mirrors and everything set up. And you don't have to do that anymore. Again, there's lots of easy ways and cheap ways to get this stuff done. Rocket Surgery Made Easy talks about just like going on Craigslist, recruiting some strangers, paying them $50 for an hour. They come into your office. You sit down with them. You record the session. You record what they're doing on screen and what they're saying. And you have a script. And you get them to sign a consent form. And it's all laid out for you. And these strangers off the street use your product. You will find, I guarantee it because I've never not done it in the hundreds of times that I've run these usability tests, something just eye-opening. Like, okay, please sign in. They just stare at the screen. They put their email address in, and they don't hit the sign in button that's right there. Like you see it, it's right there. They don't see it, okay, for whatever reason. And then at some point, they're going to look at you and you're going to say, okay, what do I do now? And you say, what do you think you do? And you try to get them to figure it out, and then obviously you're going to tell them, okay, well, there's a sign-in button right there. And then they're going to be like, oh, I didn't see that. I actually thought that was, and they're going to tell you something that I'm telling you every single time. It amazes me that they're going to find something that you didn't think of. Because when you're writing your software or you're building your product, you're the one that's thinking about it, and you know where everything is, and you think it's in the right place. Well, guess what? Not everything's going to be in the right place. So test this stuff. Code tests as well. So if you're writing code, write code tests. Software is buggy, and everybody knows it. And the best programmers write bugs, right? It's going to happen to everyone. If you write tests that test your code, then you're going to catch that stuff. I know, like when we're very, very early on and we're starting, you want to be fast and you don't want to think too much about code tests, and that's probably okay to skirt a little bit. But again, habits. If you get into these habits early on, then you'll realize that always just sticks with you throughout your company as it grows to hundreds of people. Code reviews are really important. As soon as you have that second coder, they should review your code and you should review their code. Right? You want people reviewing stuff. You want people looking at stuff. If two people are working on the same software, then they should be looking at all of the new code that's being added to that software. So measuring. So now KPIs again. We want to choose 3 to 5 at this stage. We've gotten, they're not going to be as simple as, did the thing, did smoke come out of it or not? Like they're they're important things that you believe are important to your product that you want to see that will contribute to the success of your product. So, a lot of times, again, retention and people coming back is important. That's always a good place to start. But what does that even mean? Is it a daily product? Is it a weekly product? Is it something that once a month they're going to do? That's fine. That's totally fine if it's meant to be that. But you want to establish what that thing is or what those few things are, and then really laser focus on those things. So if posting a photo is so key to your app, that better be a KPI. Photos posted every day. And you want to be aware of those numbers at all times, right? So you've got 4 KPIs. When anyone ever asks you, where are those numbers at? You know them without looking them up, okay? That's what it comes down to. Maybe you have investors at this stage. Maybe you have potential investors. Maybe you're on stage talking to someone. Regardless of what it is, you want to know those numbers. And you want to make sure that they're going in the right direction, and that as you're thinking about the things that you're going to be building next, that they're going to contribute to that. If they're not going to contribute to that, you should question why you're going to be building that thing next. And maybe you should question then the KPI and think, okay, well, that KPI is no longer important. You want to always be thinking about those sorts of things. At a lot of companies that I've been at in the past, we do quarterly reviews on those types of things, right? So we don't want to change our KPIs more often than each quarter, but what we want to do is review them every quarter. We want to look back on them, and we want to look forward and think, are these the ones that we want to continue on? I mentioned Google Analytics before. If you're doing software, it's free, include it on your page. It'll give you all sorts of interesting things. Mixpanel is another one I've used that I love. It's expensive. I think actually maybe there's a free version to start, but it gets expensive. But at that point where it gets expensive, you probably have some money to even pay for it, and I think it's great. And then, of course, the qualitative feedback. So you always want to be talking to people. You always want to be writing these things down, as I continue to say. So validate, right? So you've done all this. You've tested. You've measured all these things. Had the last release change things? Make sure that you can tell, first of all, how it can, because if you push something out there and you don't really know what it changed or how it can change things, or you're not measuring the right thing, you want to make sure that you do that. Will you invest more in it, and what will you kill, right? So if something you pushed out there, you did a 2-week cycle, you pushed something out and some KPI went up, and that's great. All right, let's invest a little bit more in it. So we did something in 2 weeks, let's do another 2 weeks of it. Let's keep iterating on that thing. Also, what should you kill? So you've been spending 2 weeks, you've been spending a bunch of iterations maybe on something that you believe in, and it's just not doing it, right? Killing things is maybe even harder than figuring out what to invest in. But you really need to concentrate and focus your time. And whether you're 2 people or whether you're 100 people, that's not going to change. You need to be working on the right things. So what are you going to kill off? At my last company, we had an app. We wanted to do an app. That wasn't our core focus. It wasn't our core product, but we wanted to do an app next to our website. Well, after 6 months or so, the app was nowhere, and we decided to kill it. And it's tough. People have been working on it for 6 months. They love it. You love it. You put a lot of time and energy into it. But it's better that you kill it because it's not going anywhere. And you have to just realize that it's time to call it, right? So we removed that, and now we don't need to think about it. We don't have to spend our time, trying to figure out how. We don't have to have these people working on it. All those sorts of things that go into that. So, killing is really important as well. So your roadmap, right? I want to talk a little bit about a roadmap for a second, because when you're sitting down to build a product, you have to have some idea of where you're going. Okay? It's really important for the bigger picture of things. Okay? So you need to understand that you're working on stuff now, and you want to have an idea of where you're going to go to next. You're still going to go through that cycle. You're still going to talk to people. You're still going to validate. But you want to know where you're going. The team needs to know where you're going. So if you've got more than 2 people now, writing stuff down becomes really important. And customers should know as well. When you're selling software to businesses, when you're doing B2B software, a lot of times customers are going to want to know. You're going to want to get them excited about it. Again, they've got budgets that they need to figure out and think about all of that. But even when you're doing B2C and you're doing cool, the cool music app or whatever, telling people where you're going is, giving them a little bit of taste of, some excitement that, hey, keeping them like, let's say, waiting on this stuff. Like it's just, you want to give them a sense of where you're going, okay? So what a roadmap is not is a definitive, absolute, unchangeable, stone engraved list, okay? So when you're putting these things down, they're a guide for you, and that's all that they are, okay? When I worked at AOL, we had 6-month roadmaps that couldn't be changed. 6 months is a really long time in our industry. When you have something for 6 months that can't change, so many outside things change that chances are the thing that you're built, that when you get to there in 6 months, it may not even be applicable anymore. It may not be interesting. It might not be useful. So as a startup, we want to use that to our advantage, right? We can change on a dime. We could take stuff that's at the end of our roadmap and move it to the front of our roadmap. I do that all the time right now. You don't want to be crazy with it because you want to have some sort of predictable path for your team and your customers, but you should be able to move those things and you should feel okay about moving those things. And when we talk about timelines for roadmap, I like to do 3, 6, and 12 months, okay? So the closer items that you're putting on the roadmap, you want to have a lot of detail on. You really want to get into, you want to have a product sheet that, requirements that explains what they are. 6 months, maybe a paragraph that kind of says, here are the things that we think are interesting, and here's how we're thinking about it. And 12 months literally could be like one line, like we want to put this widget out. That's it. And then as it gets closer, as you start to move forward, you're going to define those things more and more and more. So if we think about that, the closer things need more detail, then that's how I think a great approach to building a roadmap. So competition. If you think you're building something and you have no competition, then you're not trying hard enough to identify them. You want to know what the competition is doing, who's out there and what they're doing. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to change the way you're thinking or you're going to change your roadmap, but you want to know the other options that your customers have. They may have much better options over here, much cheaper, much more featured, much faster, whatever it is. You need to know about that. I've talked to a lot of people that say, we're doing something totally new and there's no one in our space. Well, that can't be true because you're taking up people's time in the day. So even at that level, your competition is Netflix, right? So now all of a sudden people need to open your app instead of sitting down and watching a video on Netflix. So even then, like just thinking about it at that level really helps. And when you're talking to investors, potential investors, they're going to ask you this question. And when you say, there's no real competition, they're going to kind of write you off. They're going to be like, yeah, you don't really know what you're doing. So I really, I don't think you need to obsess over it. I say be a leader and don't follow, because if you're always following them, then you're not going to be number one in your space, right? And sometimes these things are winner takes all. But you want to know what they're doing, and then you want to keep to your roadmap and figure things out for yourself. So progress and communication while you're working. So teams and projects grow. Okay, what started off as your dorm room project that was just you or maybe you and your partner, your goal is most likely to grow it. I know there's some companies out there that are 2 people forever. That's really cool. Some days I wish that was my life. But in reality, if your product is growing and getting better and better and better, you're going to have revenue coming in. You might raise some investment from outside investors. You're going to hire people. You're going to grow your team. It's really important to keep track of everything that you did, to share all those things with your team and stakeholders, and to celebrate achievements. You want to write this stuff down you want to make sure that as someone new comes onto your team, they're not starting at zero, right? So sure, they're gonna, the minute they walk in, they're not going to know anything that you've been thinking about for the last 2 years and your team's been thinking about for the last 6 months. But your goal then is to get them onboarded as quickly as possible so that maybe in a week or two or a month, they know as much as everybody else. So write all this stuff down, keep it in good places. You know, I'll give my little plug for PilotShip now, but that's some software you can use to do that sort of thing. But you really want to make sure that you're sharing this stuff with your team, okay? There's lots of team collaboration software out there. Use it. It's a lot of this stuff is great. It's a way to keep everyone on the same page. And as you grow, that's only going to get harder and harder and harder. So my last company, when I joined it at 10, we stood around in a circle every morning, said, here's what I did yesterday, here's what I'm doing today. It was called, you know, a status stand-up. And it was really easy. And I knew what all the other 9 people in the company were working on and doing. And that was great. Well, when we grew to 30, we couldn't do that anymore. So we had to come up with different and new methods of how we communicate. And then we came up with something, and then when we grew to 60, that needed to change again, because now all of a sudden 60 is a different dynamic than 30. And 1,000 and 2,000 people, forget about it. I mean, you're not going to know what everyone else is doing, or you know, it's going to be very different about how you communicate those sorts of things and all the different politics that go on. So again, I can't stress this enough, that you want to be really good about writing these things down and tracking them. I wish that I had screenshots even of some of the earliest stuff I did when I was working on StreamPad. So that company that I did by myself, I was like throwing out screenshots because I didn't even think at the time, like, man, that would be pretty useful to keep around. Now I just want to look back for nostalgia purposes. I do that with XFM and some of the other things. But yeah, just keep all this stuff around. Make sure people know where it is. Spend the time to organize it correctly. Spend the time to share it out. When you have people that are using your product, share it with them. When you have investors, you absolutely want to share it with them. This stuff's important. And lastly, have fun. Remember what we said when we started, okay? You always want to work on something that you love. Your passion that you come in is going to be contagious for your team. And I noticed this when I was on a team of 10 people. The days that I kind of walked in the office like a little, not the most chippy person I could be, the office kind of fed off that a little bit. So if you're working on something that you love, if you're working on something that you want to see exist in this world, others want to see exist, people have joined you to build this thing and make it exist, then that's awesome. So think about those things when you're choosing what you want to work on. Remember to have fun while doing this stuff. I always say, like, this industry that we're in is awesome, right? We're working on building things that we've thought of that we can turn into something that other people could potentially love, right? These are jobs that like lots of people in this world would be dying to have. So just keep that in mind when you're working on this sort of stuff, that there are going to be days that you hate your job, you hate your life, you hate the product, you can't believe you ever started on this thing, why did you ever do this? I have those days now all the time. But some days I wake up and I remember, like, I chose this, I do love it, I believe in it, and my passion is what's going to drive it forward. No one else's passion is going to drive it forward. It's your product, your baby. So think about that kind of stuff. And that's it. I want to say thank you to everyone for coming in. And if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. And we have a microphone to use those questions. So thank you.
Hi. Okay, sorry. Hi. So going back to when you mentioned about competition, so when do you feel is like the point where you're like, okay, someone has the same exact product as me, this is something that clearly has been thought about, like, do you kind of stop in your tracks or do you just keep going forward? How would you deal with the competition?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, how do you deal with competition? How do you think about it when you find something out there that kind of looks like what you're doing? Do you stop in your tracks? There's no great answer for that. I'll say I've been in all sorts of those situations where, I will think, wow, this is an incredible idea. I don't know of anything out there that exists. This, that's it. This is the best thing to ever build. And, then over the next week, I'll Google around. All of a sudden, I'm like attuned to that, and I'll find something that does pretty much what I thought. Because again, a lot of times, we're not coming up with the most unique ideas that are out there. Then it depends on really, is this product, is this company, are they winning the market? Have they already won the market? If there's no clear leader, then I think it's open, and you could be that leader, but you should look at why there's no leader. Is it because no one cares about this sort of product? That's possible. I think it really depends on what space you're in. If you're starting a music app, there's a million music apps. There's tons of competition. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start it, but you should probably come up with a little bit of a different angle. If you think I'm going to come up with a $10 a month streaming service, that's probably not like the an easy way to win. So yeah, it's tough. I have stopped in my tracks at times. I have sometimes I'll look at a product and think well, it's the idea, yeah, but not at all how I would approach it. So I think my approach is better. Other times I've looked at me wow, they nailed it. This is 10 out of 10 things that I would have done. I can't work on this. Yeah, great question though. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm gonna grab the,
Hi, one of the examples in your presentation that especially stuck with me was LinkedIn, because you said even though they introduce similar or new products to it, everyone just sticks with LinkedIn because they're so invested in it.
Yeah.
So that kind of shows how important it is to be the first to market for if you're doing a new product, being the first one there is just really helpful.
Yeah.
So where's the balance? Because obviously if you're making something new, that you think is new, there's chances are other people are working on it as well. So where's the balance that you find between almost trying to rush your way to market versus just taking your time but not taking too long, making sure you've optimized?
Absolutely. I think that is one of the toughest questions when you're building something of it's that speed versus quality, right? So if you go a little bit faster, you're maybe sacrificing on quality. But if you want to be the first to market, interesting thing, being the first to market is not always the best. So when I was at ITP way back in 2005, we were studying MySpace as social software. It was the #1 network, social network at the time. Facebook was still in colleges and kind of small, and I didn't even have an account. Facebook wasn't the first, but they were the best, right? Look at Apple products. Half the time, they're not the first anymore. Wireless charging or whatever it is, but maybe they do it the best. So I think that, yes, there are lots of instances where a company reaches a critical mass and they take off and you're not going to catch them. I mean, it would be really hard to build a social network right now against Facebook. Like LinkedIn, it would be really hard to do that. I'm not saying it can't be done because eventually all things kind of topple, right? I mean, in 2000, nobody's building an operating system because Microsoft won. They won. You're not going to build an operating system. Well, guess what? 10 years later, well, the whole paradigm shifted in computing, and now iOS and Android are the operating systems. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it depends on the market for sure. There's a lot to be said for being the first there, getting there the fastest. I think in general, you always want to move as fast as you can, but you need to think about am I sacrificing quality? Am I, again, these interactions, am I delighting people, or am I making them upset because I build something too fast and there's a bug here or there? Yeah, you just got to think about all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You want to grab the mic? Oh. Yeah, the mic's going to come over. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on finding your network, your people and mentors who are passionate about what you're interested in, but being mindful that there might be some competition there, and how do you deal with those potential conflicts of interest whilst still.
Yeah, I mean, it's naturally going to arise, especially in the software startup space that we're in, that there's going to be other people out there that are doing things that someone you want to talk to is already invested in this other thing. When I go out and I talk to VCs about raising money, for PilotShip, a lot of times the conversation is, hey, that sounds really cool. It's way too much like this company that we've already invested in, and we can't invest in that company. I think you just want to be open and honest with those people and make sure that they're open and honest with you about stuff. Holding ideas too close to you it's very difficult to then get people to respond to those, right? So you need to kind of be open with people, and you just kind of need to trust that, look, it's a conversation, and hopefully they're going to be honest with you, and they may stop you right there. If you're talking to someone and you feel like they might be working on the same thing or they might steal your idea, don't talk to them. You'll have a sense of that. But I don't put too much stock in people stealing ideas because the building part is the hard part, right? So everything we just talked about is the really difficult part. It's very rare that an idea is so incredibly great that it could build itself and become the biggest thing that there is. So I'm never really afraid of that kind of stuff. Like, again, maybe I'm not coming up with the most original ideas, and maybe the space that I'm in is a little bit like that. But I like to generally be open with people, and generally when you're open with people, they'll be open back with you, and they'll tell you that there's a conflict here, and I don't want to go on. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
So you had mentioned earlier about building hooks into your product. So I was wondering if you can give a couple examples of some hooks, maybe used in XFM or something that.
Yeah. I mean, some of the hooks. So it's actually interesting because in PilotShip, we're putting a lot of those in right now. So we're again I'm 3 months in, and we're at a point where we're very much in the middle of this process. And we've gotten to this point now where we have 5 to 10 people that have started to come back, right? So it's like we've been, for 3 months sending it to everyone we know and, talking to everyone we know, and they check it out, they give a little bit of feedback, but then they're not actually using the thing. And we know it's not really usable at that stage. Now we're entering the stage where they create an account, they did the thing we wanted. Some have come back, some haven't, and the question is why? We don't know if it's because it's not for them. We don't know if they just forgot about it. So what we're starting to build in are these types of hooks where, for instance, without getting too much into what the product does, it's encouraging you to send a weekly update to your team. And well, one of the cool things about it is that we could remind you, right? So it's so obvious, again, but we could remind you each week at a certain time or day or time that you should send these updates. So we're now working on where you can enter the schedule that you want, and then we'll send you an email, and you can reply to that email with your updates, and then those go out. So if you think about it, we're not spamming people. We're not randomly sending emails like, hey, would love you back. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. We do those sorts of things. You have to kind of play a little bit of everything. We definitely send product updates to everyone. So as we've built our list, our list of still under 100 people that have tried it out, we'll still send them, once a month, new product updates, and they can opt out if they want. But now we're building it into the product, these hooks of we want to come back. And we've thought about, again, this social validation. Well, when you're writing these long things, it would be cool if you got feedback from your teammates on this stuff, whether it's a simple like or thumbs up or whatever it is, or a comment. So building all those sorts of hooks, we're at that phase now, and it's really about tying it into your app. It's really, it's what's the natural thing that's going to happen that is just going to get people to sort of come back in, and then why would they reuse it? Well, and again, what cadence do you want them to use it on, and what are they trying to do? Yeah.
Hi, my question is about product that is kind of content heavy. How do we do MVP? Like one thing we're trying, can we just not steal, like borrow other people's thing and just quickly show and see what's the feedback? But besides that, is there any other way?
Yeah, so content heavy as in like blog posts or things like that, or
Yeah, you can think that way.
right. Yeah, I mean it's without knowing what you're doing, it's I'd say that the first blog post or the first piece of content people should find interesting. So before you even get to the heavy part, what is the first thing you wrote or you grabbed from somewhere? You say stealing, and I laugh. I think that's funny because a lot of products when they were starting out would steal or scrape from others. I mean, Google literally that's their product, right? They scrape the web and then make it interesting. XFM, we scraped the web for music. I've heard that Airbnb, when they were first starting out, they would just manually go onto Craigslist, copy their listings, and put them on Airbnb. Like, Craigslist didn't love that, but like Airbnb is laughing now about that. So I mean, look, you do what you have to do to get the content there. However, by whatever means, I think there's one thing I've heard. It's you don't ask. You don't ask. You beg for forgiveness later on. I'm totally messing up that quote. But the point is like this story. With StreamPad. I was integrating a bunch of services, and there was Last.fm, which was a music app back in the day, and there's Pandora back in the day, which still exists now. And I made the mistake. I integrated Last.fm because they had an API and it was easy. And then I made the mistake of emailing Pandora, can I embed your player into my site? And I had already done it technically. I knew how to do it. But I reached out and asked them, and they said no. And they were just like, no, you can't do that. And the thing is like, I should have just done it. And then like, at some point, like if they noticed, they could have come and talked to me. And at that point, I could have been a baby of a better conversation, would have had some leverage, whatever it was. So yeah, I mean, do what you got to do in the early days for sure. But again, even the heavy part, like I don't know what you're trying to do, but if the first piece of content is not interesting for people, then the next 1,000 might not be either. So yeah, sure.
So in the social economy, and you just mentioned Airbnb, when you have peer-to-peer, will the approach be the same? Because there's two target customers: the people supplying, and also the people who who rent or like an Uber. So would the approach be the same?
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of the harder, the double-sided market is like one of the harder things to build, right? Because you have to get one, but one won't come without the other, and this one won't come without that one. Yeah, you need to figure out how you can get one side in as easy as possible. The great things about those the eBays and the Airbnbs and the Ubers is that once you get that going, then they could grow really quickly, right? So everybody loves those. But yeah, I mean, with Airbnb, like nobody's going to come list because they have no users. So what they did was they went and scraped Craigslist and looked like they had all this content. So they had the one side, and now they just needed that other side. The other side came and was like, oh, there's a lot of content here. We're on this side. And then all of a sudden they had a lot of people using it, and then more listers wanted to come. So
more specifically,
yeah.
When you're building inventory, for instance, like the inventory in the beds, the rooms, whatever it is, or the the cars that drive around, is it the same time frame? To build that inventory and the time to have the app, because you said you can't have it to be too long.
Yeah, I mean, it might take longer. It's tough for me to answer. I think they're all slightly different. With XFM, if this is somewhat applicable, we wouldn't say it was a two-sided market, but like we needed a lot of music, and if we had a lot of music, the people would come, and then if the people would come, more people would want to put more music. And we built web scrapers that could scrape like hundreds of thousands of links in a day. So time frame didn't matter. It wasn't a long time frame. It was just we were able to scrape that kind of stuff. I've heard that StreetEasy the way they got built, they got started was they scraped the websites of the all the real estate companies within New York, and then like all this horrible websites that were out there, they normalized all that data and then put it into one place. So how long it took them to scrape that stuff? I mean, again, they maybe did it in a week, maybe it took them a year, and we don't know. But yeah, it depends. It might change the time frame a little bit. I hear your point that like, if you don't have that stuff, no one could really ever like it. But you know, you're working on that side. You're also working on the overall experience. Like, let's assume you had stuff. So you maybe just put some fake stuff there and see how people react to it. Yeah, cheating is like totally cool as well. You know, like again, we're not trying to break any laws here, but like you do what you have to do to get that content. Google didn't ask permission of the entire web to scrape their entire, you know, every website and organize it. They just did it. And now they're so big that no one tells them not to do it. Any other questions? Okay, well, thanks again, everyone.